Okay, greetings to everybody at Church Universal and Triumphant and area churches in Kennebec County, Maine. Namaste. My name is Ben, also known as Brother Eli, and I am giving an update for people at Church Universal and Triumphant and also for people who are using my information, my online information, some of which is going to start to contain information more relevant to area churches. So I'm part of a ministry called Holy Orders at the Summit Lighthouse. For most purposes, the Summit Lighthouse is the name of the church, and it's basically synonymous with CUT, Church Universal and Triumphant. There are some differences historically, but I think you have to be pretty deeply seated within the organization to understand, or you have to be sort of at a board level status to really understand the minute differences between those two organizations. We follow a guru named Elizabeth Clare Prophet. Mark Prophet was the guru preceding her husband. Church Universal and Triumphant was established in 1975 through an instruction known as a dictation from a master, an ascended master to whom we refer to as Johannes. I believe Johannes was Pope John the 23rd when he was embodied on the planet. I will look that up at some juncture. But also, through my work, I have uncovered that Church Universal and Triumphant was established by Jesus and Buddha. Mother herself informed me of that. The church, the sponsors of the church, if you will, are Jesus Christ and Gautama Buddha. So we're a Christian and also part Buddhist. So that's my ministry. I'm in Holy Orders through CUT, Church Universal and Triumphant, and we follow 8 paths. So I spend a lot of time 8 mystical paths. It's a syncretic faith, so I basically have a lot of leeway to explore and do what I want, and I think that study what I want in terms of theology and soteriology and eschatology, and I think that a lot of people in church feel the same way and are similar, take advantage of that sort of freedom. But we also do have a dedicated path. Some would find actually strict. Some Buddhists and even Christians are rigid in their adherence, and that's for a reason. In my experience, I like a codified path where I can see the unfoldment and where one step leads to another. So you can use the religion, the faith, in a couple of different ways. You can stick your feet in the water if you'd like and check it out. Everybody is welcome to do that. Or you could have a more dedicated path. And I like to support people on both paths, certainly. But I've had a lot of experience within the church. I'm a chaplain now for the U.S. military, U.S. Armed Forces. It is something that I've contracted. I offer as contractual services. So I require support from the church, or seek support from the church, I should say. I help you, you help me, one hand washes the other, and so on. So my mission is to get billeting so that I'm paid full-time by the military or by church to continue this work. It's important work. It's meaningful to a lot of people. I leave it up to you to decide whether or not my work stands the test of time. As stated, I have a lot of experience within church, and I believe and know personally that I'm part of the magisterium. So if you benefited from the teachings of Elizabeth and continue to benefit, then I encourage you to study my work, which supplements her work and complements it in certain key ways. So Mother, we call her Mother, and we call the leaders of our church messengers. So that's a little bit different from some other Christian paths. Catholics have priests. There are some very dedicated pastors in this area, so I want to give a shout out to them and express my support for them, because I know that they do very hard work on behalf of people who are in a lot of trouble, and they fulfill a need and they serve a function when government fails, unfortunately. And sometimes I think often it's preferable that people resort to church rather than government. That's just a caveat. And there are people, former members of CUT, who disagree with that and at least openly state that they would rather see government in charge. I think that we should have a fair government that is properly directed, but the flame of God needs to be ignited on the altar of the heart in all the leaders. Otherwise, you have no right to govern if you're not fully acculturated within the world of God and the community of God. You make, God-fearing. You may call yourself agnostic, but whatever the path you're on, you have to have that flame ignited within your heart in the right way and a right perspective on humanity. That's not negotiable at all. So the world is in a lot of trouble. That's my presentation. That's how I was taught, and I believe that it's important that everybody band together to push forward. So my mission is fairness and equality among church members, but encouraging people to strengthen their individual ties to God so that we can be part of a community. But individuals are important, and there's a lot of loss within the church and exterior to the church when that's not acknowledged. When there's a cookie cutter, for instance, with what's going on with Corona, our church spoke out very firmly about the lies associated with coronavirus and the alleged pandemic. It's not fair to single out churches for closure, which is what the U.S. government did. Unfortunately, it permitted state governors basically to single out churches and church leaders for abuse because the governors who decided to do that are not God-directed people. They don't have mature hearts. They're not capable of being faithful to God's truth. And since those key components are missing, they're not capable of governing properly. People at the top tier of U.S. government who are God-directed entirely agree with my position, additionally, including people within U.S. DOJ, when they make it here. Unfortunately, historically, the U.S. has been very slow to respond, and that has to do partially with how many fallen people, fallen angels, the Satans, if you will, how many of those people have infiltrated government. They have no business trying to operate government, and it takes discernment and experience to recognize the difference between someone who's capable of being saved and someone who's not capable of being saved in this round. As Mother says, not everybody wants to be saved right now, and the additional caveat is not everybody can be saved right now. You have to have God-fearing people making their way to Zion. So I support that. I support an effort to bring the God's tribes to the homeland. I do. So I supplement the work of Elizabeth Clare Prophet. And I also forge it's new work, but when I present new work, I always vet it through the guru, so I want people to be aware. People are right to challenge. They are right to challenge when they hear new information from new people. If I'm new to you, and I don't think I'm new to too many people at church anymore, but if I am new to you, and I come to you with information that you haven't heard corroborated by Mother, I do support, fair questions with regard to the depth of my experience. But I believe that I'm on the right path, and as stated, I refer to Elizabeth Clare Prophet and Mark Prophet. I ask for their permission and their approval with a good deal of frequency, and I receive it additionally. So area churches. So I have that project, which is my ministry. Okay, we're called, individual members of the church are called world teachers. So you may refer to me as a world teacher. I'm a teacher, but world teacher is another name for Chela, which is another name for adherent to a guru. So the gurus at CUT are world teachers. I'm a world teacher. I'm also a minister. I'm a minister licensed to do marriages. And I'll explain to you more about my path to ministry at some point when it's relevant to do so. But I am permitted to conduct marriages and funerals and other religious rites in a variety of faiths. So I'm here to make myself available for that as well. And I'm friends with some very amazing ministers online who also do, excuse me, marriage rites and other kind of rites. So funerals, I'll talk to you a little bit about our position when it comes to burying the dead. We have specific beliefs that some of which are Buddhist, and in some instances we encourage cremation. But Mother at some point said, I believe that the right way to bury is to have the body on ice for a certain number of days, or you're not supposed to, the spirit is supposed to be given sufficient time, or the soul is supposed to be permitted to ascend. So, although in the inner temple, where I was instructed that it's only cremation, and it resonated as truthful with me because I knew that from Buddhism as well. I could see where it carried over into the church. I understood the connection. Subsequent to that, I heard it's possible to bury, but you have to do it the right way. In my faith, I really just support cremation. I think it's a lot of extra work to worry about bodies being put on ice. But Jews and so forth are very particular about their sitting Shiva and their burial rites. Additionally, I don't mean to veer off on that topic, but marriages, I think being a celebrant is more exciting. Although there are different ways to celebrate, and not all of them have to do with marriage. So that's my mission, and I think it's actually over. I'm licensed to do marriages in over 50 different religions, and it's in, I think, a majority of the states at this point. I'll have to check again, but it's a little different from the licensure that was achieved by people at CUT. They're different. We're the same. We really are the same kind of reverend ultimately, but my licensure is slightly different from the path that other people have taken, I believe, to some extent. But I am licensed and permitted to go to the town office and sign a card saying that you were married by the Summit Lighthouse. So for what that's worth. So I'm a minister in Holy Orders, and also an ordained minister. So world teacher and ordained minister additionally. But there's also a new undertaking that has to do with helping area churches, and it's actually referred to, the technical word for it is parachurch. Parachurch, like the first part of paratrooper or parachute. Parachurch. A parachurch. It contains members that where their goal is to support area churches and to support the pastoral needs. I had known this intuitively because I had that impulse, but it's actually a category of religion. It's a category of faith where individual members of a certain church will attempt to not proselytize, I think, as much as integrate to an extent with area churches to provide pastoral support. Although, for instance, I'm not fully Episcopalian and don't have the same experience as an Episcopalian pastor, I have enough knowledge, I believe, and ability to reach out and integrate to support an Episcopalian wedding, for instance, or an Episcopalian or Baptist event. So I'm attempting to do that. The goal, sort of continuously, the trick is to ensure that funding remains, well, that funding actually begin for all of these efforts that actually support TSL and CUT. Ultimately, the work that I do can only be contributory to your life and to your all facets of your reality if you are a member of the Summit Lighthouse. So money has never flowed in the right way with regard to this, although unfortunately, and I'm looking to change that. I'm really looking to get donations from people who are able to give. I don't turn people out of my ministry when they can't give, but I worry if someone is not able to tithe at this point, because it means that there's something not circulating the right way in that individual's reality, to the extent that that individual wants to admit to that. I think that employed people or people who are properly retired can afford to tithe, and if you can't afford to tithe, then I think it's problematic for both you and the church, again, I don't want to interfere in anybody's individual choice, or I don't want to violate anybody's privacy, but people in church should be supported, in my view, to the point at which they're fully employed or fully properly retired and are able to give. Because giving is so important. It's so important to your own spiritual development, and it's important to just where you are on the path. People should have the choice to give. Everybody should have the choice to give and to sponsor. And I think it's very fulfilling for individuals to make it there. I do. And I think you'll feel fulfilled when you're able to give to a project that you fully support. And I want to earn your respect and trust, if I haven't yet, by encouraging people to the point at which people are able and comfortable to give, so that I am able to have a life where I have a partner and can afford a partner, where I'm married and have private transportation, and a house that I own, and a chapel that I can build for my church family. All that is incredibly important to me. So that's background with regard to my ministry. And then parachurching, which I've started. And then, let's see, I had a great meeting with a board member at the Free Methodist Church. Super interesting group of people, very fascinating background, and I'm reading about it on the web. I'll distribute information about how that form of Methodism differs from, I think it's United Methodism, where it's more centralized, and I'll tell you more about that organization as well. But I have feelers out to the Episcopalians, to the Baptists, to Life Community, which is an independent church here in Gardner, and then there's a church I've told some of you about called Calvary Foursquare Church, and Calvary Foursquare Church was started by a minister that many of you might know. Her name is Amy Semple McPherson. Amy Semple McPherson, Mother and Mark tell us, was an embodiment of Mary Magdalene. So Calvary Foursquare Church is somewhat similar to the Summit Lighthouse with regard to its views on Christianity, but they're Pentecostal. They're not I am at all, or Ascended Masters at all. They're neither I am or am. They're purely Pentecostal, but their leader is Mary Magdalene. So super interesting opportunity there. That's so parachurching, my personal ministry, where I need the funding and support to begin a chapel. I want people to move to Gardner as part of a Zionist effort as well. I'm interested in also having a permanent pied-à-terre in Montana, and I'm trying to encourage people to work in that direction, because I think that's an unfinished project. Then my videos online are part of my ministry, but I've started my U.S. Armed Forces chaplaincy videos in addition, and you're welcome to look at those, and I marked them. There's a 5-part video on UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon. Previously, in decades prior, they were known as UFOs. The government, the U.S. government and the Air Force, particularly, I think in conjunction with the dawning of the Space Force, has taken an interest. Actually, before Space Force, there was an interest in flying in UFOs for a couple of different reasons. But if you can just stop to think for a minute, it's important that we know what's going on in our airspace, and that we don't let Nephilim and extraterrestrial invaders invade our airspace. It's important for 2 reasons. One is that some of those creatures should not be allowed here ever in the first instance. Secondly, if we are receiving a lot of reports of flying saucers, unidentified aerial phenomenon, and so forth, it means that there's a problem with our security regarding foreign intruders. And it's important that all our borders are properly sealed and that our pilots know who's coming and going at any given time. And the U.S. government acknowledges that. The Pentagon acknowledges that. In fact, I have access to the reports from Majestic 12, all sorts of President Truman reports, handwritten reports where President Truman has authorized money to study flying saucers, because as stated, they can be indicative of foreign overseas enemy aircraft invading our space. So I work on that project, and I'm not afraid to talk about flying saucers at all, and I would rather confront it honestly and speak my truth, so that, you know, I stimulate interest and encourage interest in the topic, and also attempt to hook employment for myself, because as I stated, it's important as a minister who is vital to the success of Church Universal and Triumphant. It's important that my efforts are supported. So I'm hoping that it turns into a paid gig, which is why basically I share that information with you, so that those of you who have connections to the military can pass it forward, and have someone call me on the horn and say, come to Washington and we'll pay you to do it, so that we can secure our borders, be safer, more informed, and who knows, ultimately, if there are angelic creatures out there trying to reach the planet, let's also be on board for that. There's a potential that that's going to happen, but growing up within CUT in the Summit Lighthouse, yeah, we were taught to pray away Nephilim, and Nephilim is another word for aliens, bad aliens. There are references to Nephilim in the Bible, and they're referred to as the Satans, the fallen ones, and they're, when God kicked a third of them, or a third of them fell from a third of the people fell from heaven, and it's part of the whole story in Revelation, and so forth. And yeah, I will walk you through that information. But it's important to extend respect to people's narratives as well. So I take it seriously when someone says they've been abducted by a flying saucer, and I like to respect those stories. So in those videos, you will hear me recount my own experience with ET craft, but I will also tell you about the experiences of people like Travis Walton, who was abducted from Snowflake, Arizona, in the 70s, and was missing for, I think it was over 5 days. The experience of Betty and Barney Hill, who were taken from the side of the road after their car had been followed. They were tracked by an extraterrestrial craft, and they were submitted to some very horrible medical examinations when they were abducted. They have quite a legacy on file at the University of New Hampshire. You can go in and read their papers, and the Hill collection is available for public perusal. So I recount those stories and help people navigate those stories, and I try to put them into the proper historical context. There have been presidents who have claimed to have seen flying saucers. Jimmy Carter saw one. Allegedly, President Nixon brought Jackie Gleason to a top secret location in Florida, and showed him alien bodies. So there are multiple stories, some of which can be partially corroborated at least. Jackie Gleason actually did meet President Nixon, because it's in the Nixon diary. So, it's important that we use discernment when taking a look at what is purely fictitious and what is more along the lines of maybe narratives that cross the line between conventional lore and events that occurred in material reality. There's experience unfolds along a spectrum, and so that's what I discuss in those videos. So the chaplaincy videos are interesting. Let's see, parachurching is interesting and potentially useful, and then my standard ministry, of course, is ongoing. But use the videos. What I'm trying to encourage people to do is to start responding, I think, more specifically to my work, so that there's more of an impetus for me to push it forward. People have been saying, make more chaplaincy videos, and I'm interested in working on that. One project is for me to do part 6. There are 5 parts to the UAP videos, my work on behalf of the military. It's in 5, as I stated, it's in 5 parts. But what needs to occur is I need to go through and I need to process the information so that I give a final sort of examination. What ought to happen is there are a few errors in each of the 5 parts that are important to correct. And so part 6 really ought to be the finalized kind of perfected video where I am able to track all the true information. For instance, I don't want to mistake an SR-71 for an SR-72. They're different kinds of top secret reconnaissance planes. Or I want to know that the B-52, clearly that the B-52 preceded the Blackbird, also known as the SR-71, both of which were developed at Area 51 in Groom Lake, in the top secret part of Nevada. And when I talk about the secret airline, I want you to know that it's Janet, for instance. It's called, for some reason, it's referred to as Janet. I neglected to mention that in my first, in the video covering it, but it flies out of McCarran Air Force Base, which actually is the public, it's not an Air Force base, McCarran International Airport, the secret airline that takes the employees to the secret base in Nevada where they develop the SR-71, the Blackbird, and work on projects like Aurora, and allegedly, as I discuss in my chaplaincy videos, utilize recovered downed extraterrestrial craft to improve military technology that allegedly goes on down there. And I have witnesses to that as well, and I talk about their lives and work, their bios, men like David Adair, David Adair is a rocket scientist. There are a couple of different people I've been interacting with electronically, where I'm putting their work in new context and giving it more airtime. So right, I need to make a part 6, but the more interaction I have, if I encourage people to give so that I can actually make this a vocation as opposed to just filling in parts. I think it's not as helpful to not take it seriously. I think to take it seriously, you have to be properly officed. I have to move. I need my driver's license back, and not be under threat by either the U.S. government or foreign governments. So all of these, I need more protection from the church, but your interaction on the boards will help push that forward. So instead of side conversations, if you could actually get on my board and ask questions under YouTube, or if you can actually message me, that would be perfect. And I will do my part in trying to establish a better way of receiving, for instance, your modest donation. For people who give just a couple bucks a month, I'm going to start sending a specialized newsletter out, and I hope that helps propel your religious work forward and the rest of your life forward, truly, and that it continues the work established by Mark and Elizabeth Clare Prophet, and that it's consonant with their objectives, because that is part of my effort. And there are some area churches I feel that need to be taken into receivership. The Catholic Church in Maine, my part of Maine, is not doing very well at all and is involved in a lot of unlawful satanic activity that is directed by men and arises from its disconnection with the true path, and it needs to be corrected. It's just a fact. It's just a fact. Including the hybrid, horrible government meets church monstrosity that is social services is administered to the Catholic Church. It's a nightmare. People are being singled out for elimination effectively, and nobody's talking about it, and it needs to be a public conversation. So if you want to help with that effort, that's great. It means try to support my ministry by donating, but also by interacting with my information by way of email, posting to my YouTube channel, and supporting what I put on Facebook as well, trying to interact directly with the information so that we can engage the dialogue. So that's how to use my work. Those are the paths. My personal ministry, which is Holy Orders to the Summit Lighthouse, parachurching, which is reaching out to the area churches when they want us to do that. Um, and then my chaplaincy work. I think it's those three right now. Oh, there's a fourth effort too. Right. So I'm also chronicling how in the unfoldment, media stories are part of progressive revelation. So um, I'm watching shows that refer to CUT all the time. They don't refer to all religion necessarily, and they're not about all faiths necessarily, but rather they're specifically about our path. Those shows include, which will be surprising to people as well, it should, but it's time that we bring forward the fact that our friends in the media are supporting us, attempting to support us by basically providing us with information that can help. Um, Sometimes it's important to keep things under. Um, you don't want to put the light of God when you're inspired in your art and broadcast media under a bushel. You want people to receive the information about how wonderful it is that we are pushing forward, and they're providing support for the litigation that I've initiated too by making these broadcasts. So the shows are Great News, um, which is out of um, what I call Second City in Chicago, and a lot of people in New York and Los Angeles know about Second City. Great News is produced, I think, by Tina. I don't think Tina Fey produces it. She's acted in it. I'm trying to think of who. The producers actually. I think the producer is one of the women on the show, and then Tina Fey might co-produce it, but she's also in it. And then there are a number of known actors within that. One of whom has starred in a show called Happily Divorced with Fran Drescher, Fran Drescher, the nanny, where her whole shtick is, I'll say it, I mean, usually her shtick involves being a Jewish woman, an urban Jewish woman, um, but, so she's in a show called Happily Divorced. I just say that, I don't say it as shtick, it's like, kind of like Joan Rivers. Um, Joan Rivers doesn't like the term Borscht Belt comic, but she's part of a lineage of Jewish comics, basically. Um, but the show that I was also working on before they took it off the air, unfortunately, was called Living with Fran. Okay, Living with Fran, which everybody on the show says is a problem because she remarried a much younger man, and or she has a much younger man living with her when her son comes home after getting kicked out of medical school. So that's kind of the whole setup for it. But that went off the air and was actually taken off of Netflix, unfortunately, because it was quite a wonderful show. And Ben Feldman was in that, and Misty Treya, and some other really wonderful Jewish actors. So I look at that, I try to support that. Great News is fabulous if you want to hear inside jokes about CUT and the Summit Lighthouse, because it's just covered with our sort of evangelism and specific references to work in which we've all contributed, and so it remains relevant for us to follow it. And then I'm watching shows like Parks and Recreation, which also ties to Second City and has a definite tie to sort of the work that we're doing. And there are a number of shows that are relevant. Gilmore Girls, and I have notes. I started notes, but some people I think will be more interested in working on the media component of what it is that I do. So that's kind of a fourth effort. And then whatever's going on in Washington, I sort of partitioned myself off from that. Maybe I shouldn't, but I never seem to have traction to get out of here. So given money to travel, I would go and lobby, for instance, and one of the first things I would do is attack this COVID problem from the perspective of church, because, and I posted the information to my criminal defense attorney board. Several churches in the U.S. sued, including actually the Diocese of Brooklyn, also sued the state of New York for overreaching with regard to COVID. So COVID is a huge problem. It remains a huge problem, even though we've overcome certain stages of it after an enormous, bloody, costly battle, where people died, and not as a result of the airborne illness, quote unquote, but because they're being shoved out of the grocery stores into the streets and into homelessness and isolation as a result of being forced to wear masks, for instance. How humiliating to someone who was tortured in a mental hospital for his religious viewpoints, for instance, to have to look at that every day. People don't care enough not to wear a mask in my presence. They don't care enough. They don't have it in their hearts to say no to doing that. So that has to be addressed. The fact that the governors are singling out people for abuse and torture who are additionally abusing people who have spoken out against torture because they're too cowardly to deal with the reality that they fail as leaders because they're not God-directed people. The fact that governors in these states are doing that is a huge problem. These are tyrants who should not be in power, and it's just a fact. Either people are going to believe me, or and push forward to walk in the light, to protect your family, to protect everybody around you, your own life, and to have um, live a protected, safe, properly oriented life, or they're not going to, and there's just going to be more loss. But yeah, these people who claim to be in power need to be removed from power where power is not warranted. So I hope I made that clear. Yeah, those are the efforts, and so that's how to use my videos and information. God bless. I'm going to go tonight, try to do more work on this part 6 of this creature feature where I'm talking about flying saucers. I'm doing it in the context of the military. Well, it might interest some of you who are in the military, who are interested in high-tech phenomena, okay, and who know about warships and warcrafts, and who are warfighters, as I am. What will be interesting to you is that I have a lot of access to, sort of despite myself, leading edge military information regarding aero technology, and it's getting to the point where I'm also talking about the ships too, the aircraft carriers, and that sort of thing. So it's interesting for that. Yeah, I mistakenly came up with SR-72, which I didn't know existed, and in fact, and the next day I looked it up online, and actually it's under development. So the craft that was supposedly inspired by extraterrestrial technology, it has a second iteration that they're trying to release. So those of you who are into high tech and interesting machinery will have an appreciation for the detail with which, for whatever reason, I have been gifted. I don't understand why God puts it on my heart all the time, but there you have it. And I'm able to go through and pick out the relevant narratives relating to Roswell and the crashes and so forth, and underground bases that are in New Mexico that are problematic because some are regular military personnel allegedly, and that they're hobnobbing with actual extraterrestrials. That's one of the allegations. I'm looking at that as well. There are a bunch of interesting stories, and I'll guide you through it. But I need support, I need your interaction, your input, and ideally to get this newsletter going. So I'm motivated to actually write a newsletter, send it to all of you, and think about you as individual church members after you've given $1 a month or however much money. But yeah, I need enough money to start a church up here in Gardner to buy one, and also to open up mortgages and things like that, so that people who want to move here and pray together in the style of Elizabeth Clare and Mark Prophet are encouraged to do that, definitely. But yeah, also Gallatin County is important to me too. Montana is important to me. I need a trailer up there and a truck and continuous lights throughout the year and a generator, and not a lot. I'm not asking for all of New York City yet. It would be nice to have that, but someone has to do something about New York. I'm not sure when it's going to be me to start getting after them about COVID and the fallout, but someone has to do and say something. So consider me in your tax planning. Okay, that's the information, and God bless everybody. please email to me or use social media to communicate with me if you can contribute. And check me out on YouTube. I am on Twitter. You can see the church I'd like to buy on Twitter, which is in Houston, Texas. It's a beautiful, huge church, but that's going to cost a lot of money. But we need to do something that's televised professionally. It's time. And yeah, let's take a look at stuff together, definitely. Namaste. That's the information for now. I'll see you guys in the retreats. And with any luck, see you online tonight if you're able to communicate with me sufficiently to inspire me to do this part 6 of the refined information about unidentified aerial phenomena, UAPs. Thank you, and I look forward to working with you guys tonight and into the future. Bye now.